Good morning, and thank you for joining us for a presentation on next-generation technologies from Spectra Logic. I'm Tracy Kendall, Senior Channel Program Manager, and I'm very pleased to introduce our guest speaker and Product Line Manager, Mr. John HIles. Today, John will cover some of our recent new product announcements, beginning with our archive-grade NAS disk solution, nTier Verde, and also introducing Spectra's BlackPearl deep storage appliance. Before we begin, should you have any questions at any time during the presentation, you can type them into the chat window, and we'll do our best to address all of your questions at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to our guest speaker, Mr. John HIles.
Great. Thank you very much, Tracy. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about a couple of products in the Spectra portfolio, the first of which is nTier Verde. We released this product last spring. It's the fourth generation of our disk product line, so we've been doing this for quite some time. We will spend roughly half the presentation time talking about Verde. After that, we will go ahead and move into our latest and newest product that was announced in October of this year, which is the BlackPearl deep storage device. After we're done with that, we'll go ahead and take questions if you have any at that point in time. So when we think about Verde, we spent a lot of time talking to customers about the use cases, how they were using the product, what kind of problems and issues they were running into. And one of the things that we found was that across a variety of different uses, there were a lot of similar issues. It didn't matter whether you were looking at archive, backup, media and entertainment applications, or surveillance, people had a lot of the same types of problems. All these users were able to boil down their issues or problems into a fairly unique or similar set of issues that started with dealing with large files and data sets. Oftentimes they were looking at sequential access operations. They frequently had fairly sophisticated, complex, and sometimes expensive data management software involved in the loop to move their data to and from their storage devices. And one of the things that was really interesting is that we found with a lot of customers, they were starting to have non-storage people managing their storage. This might be general IT folks that were managing the storage. One of the other things that a lot of these customers faced was significant data growth, and this was despite the fact that they were sometimes keeping only a single copy of whatever data that they had stored in their repository. And of course, they also had limited data access to some of their data simply because of the nature of the complexity of the installation and the software that was involved. Given those different issues, we were able to boil it down to something that's fairly common across storage environments, which was our solutions are too complex and they're too expensive. So how do we address that? Well, what we came out with was an archive-grade storage platform that is highly targeted. It's designed to be extraordinarily simple, and we'll talk about the ease with which it can be installed and configured here shortly. It was designed to be very cost-effective, both in terms of the initial acquisition costs and following operating costs. It didn't require a lot of additional software to operate. It wasn't highly populated with software applications, which reduced the complexity and the cost. And we also wanted to make it very reliable, not simply in terms of the hardware uptime or availability, but also in terms of the integrity of the data that is stored on the device. Given those parameters, we've developed nTier Verde, which is, again, the fourth generation in our disk product line, and we designed it for the following use cases. It can be a backup target. It can be used in an archive architecture. It can be used as a digital parking lot or temporary storage for data that's got to go someplace before it's transitioned on for further processing. It can be used as a tape cache in an HSM type of configuration, and it can readily be used in the video surveillance field as a tier for video data storage. One of the things that makes Verde very simple to use is the graphical user interface, which we have named StrataView. Truthfully, you don't need to be a storage expert in order to set up and manage archive-grade storage like nTier Verde. It can take as few as 3 to 5 mouse clicks to complete most of the tasks, and installation and basic configuration can be as little as 30 minutes, even less, to go from the box on your crate into a rack to configured and ready to run. The screen you're looking at now is the actual StrataView dashboard, and this is part of what makes it so simple to use. The left-hand side of the screen includes a lot of the components, the pools, the volumes, the network, all the moving parts of the solution that you can configure, that you need to monitor, that you need to adjust, etc. Each one of those items, whether it's a hardware system, serial number, capacity, a pool name, raw size, available, etc., can be clicked on. When you click on those items, the right-hand side of the screen will present you information about that item. In this particular case, someone went into the performance section and clicked on the main pool, and what they had pop up on the right-hand side of the screen were all the metrics and variables associated with that particular main pool, so you can very easily and very readily see the performance, the operating characteristics, the setup of that pool, and so forth. It makes it super simple to not only set up and configure the Verde platform, but it also makes it very simple to run. Some other targeted features that are included in Verde include intelligent rebuilds. For instance, in most disk platforms, whenever a hard drive has failed and needs to be rebuilt, the rebuild algorithms will reconstruct all of the sectors on the disk. With an intelligent rebuild, we will reconstruct the sectors that have data in them, but the sectors that do not have data don't need to be reconstructed. This means that the reconstructed drive and the time required to rebuild it is much less than it would otherwise be, getting you back in operational condition a little more quickly. From a compression standpoint, compression is a fairly standard feature, but we can go ahead and apply compression at the volume level to increase usable storage as well as performance. One of the key features of the Verde platform is its data integrity ability. So for every block that gets written to Verde, we will go ahead and conduct advanced checksum to protect against silent data corruption, and we will continue to checksum either on a periodic basis as set by policy or on a manual basis at your discretion to ensure that the data remains valid for however long it resides on Verde. And last but not least, the performance on Verde can easily be optimized. In the StrataView window, there's actually a slider bar, and you can click on that slider bar and slide it to the left or right to optimize the Verde platform for either performance or capacity or some midpoint combination of the two. So you have a highly adjustable and easily modifiable box to meet whatever requirements you have in your storage environment. Verde actually comes in two sizes. There's a 2U Verde and a 4U Verde. You can see a lot of the specifications there. The 2U box starts with 6 drives and goes to 11. We use a 4 terabyte hard disk drive in there, so you have up to 44 terabytes of raw disk storage in the 2U Verde, and you can put one expansion node on there, and that expansion node can take you actually up to 35 drives, which would be the 4U Verde you see on the right-hand column. In that particular platform, you can start with 10 drives or 40 terabytes going all the way out to 35 drives and 140 terabytes in a single 4U Verde box, and you can expand that out to fill a complete rack with 9 expansion nodes, so you have 1.7 petabytes of raw storage maximum. With regard to data protection, there are a number of different options there, ranging from mirroring to single parity, double parity, and even triple parity. So we do provide the capability for users to protect their data to a very high degree with triple parity if they so choose. In most cases, we will recommend a double parity, which is fairly standard protection level, but some customers like the added reliability of data availability that they're going to get with triple parity. Both appliances come with what we refer to as hot spares, in which case you can populate additional drives in there above and beyond the drives that you're using for production purposes. And if one of those production drives goes down, you can fail over to a hot spare that's already contained within the appliance and continue using that while the first drive gets rebuilt or replaced depending on the requirement. Supported protocols on the boxes are both NFS and CIF, so that's fairly standard. And of course, you've got Gig-E data ports in both standard and optional features for both boxes, so you have a wide variety of configurable options with regard to connectivity. So at the end of the segment, nTier Verde is once again very targeted to be super simple, low cost, highly data protected, and tremendously scalable. So with that, that covers the Verde platform. We will go ahead and start talking next about BlackPearl, which is our most recent deep storage offering announced in October of 2013. So it's been available for about 4 months. And it's the most scalable long-term storage platform that you can find, providing lowest cost way to store data, a tremendously easy way to move and store bulk data, and the bulk data is a key statement there. And it can scale to exabytes and beyond depending on the solution construct that you put on your floor. So what exactly is BlackPearl? Well, for starters, BlackPearl is a client-server-based deep storage solution. And a lot of people ask, well, what is deep storage? Deep storage is low-cost, very efficient, highly dense, highly scalable object storage that's generally accessed through a REST-based API. It's designed for users with large data sets, several hundred terabytes and beyond, who are dealing with large files and objects, who need very low recall rates or can withstand low recall rates in getting their data back, and typically have indefinite retention periods. So this is called deep storage because we're talking about lots of data put away safely and securely for long periods of time that is not accessed very often, but you can't get rid of it. How exactly does BlackPearl work? So BlackPearl, as I stated, is a client-server architecture, which means there are two components. You need the client piece, which is a software API and plug-in that can be used at the host side at the point of data creation. And then we've got the actual hardware server component, which is the BlackPearl Appliance. We will talk about each of these separately within the next couple of slides, but from a workflow perspective, we'll stay on this slide for a moment. Typically speaking, what happens is that the client is appended to an application at the point of data creation or processing. When that data is given to the client will move the data in object form to the BlackPearl Appliance. The BlackPearl Appliance is a solid-state disk cache where those objects, which have been transferred by the client, land on the disk cache and are organized and queued up for movement out to tape in such a way that it maximizes the streaming capability of the tape as well as the full capacity of the tape media by filling up the tape cartridges without any gaps. So a simple example would be if you are a genomics laboratory and you have 1,000 DNA samples that you have just mapped out, you could line up the file that includes all those to be given to the DS3 client. The DS3 client would move that file using the file structure naming conventions as part of the object names, which are put onto the BlackPearl Appliance. Those objects would then be passed on to the tape drives within the library behind the BlackPearl Appliance. The BlackPearl Appliance would track the objects. It would keep track of metadata about the objects. It will also drive the library as a host for the library so that it not only tracks the objects, but also the tapes and the locations of the objects on those tapes within the library. So the objects get moved out to the library. At some point in time, the analyst may want that data back. He would go into the DS3 client and click on the file that had that data, and that would tell the BlackPearl Appliance to go out and get the objects from the tape cartridge in the library and read that data back into the appliance. The appliance would then make the data available back to the client to the application upstream. All this happens over 10 gig Ethernet interface on the front side and either fiber channel or SAS connectivity on the back side to the tape drives. So the next question after that is, what is DS3? DS3 stands for Deep Simple Storage Service, and it's a REST API based on Amazon Web Services' initial S3 REST API. Amazon's API was primarily designed for smaller file sets being transported back and forth at highly regular intervals to random access storage devices like this. What we did was put about 3 to maybe 4 additional commands onto that S3 API and those commands allow for the use of sequential media and removable media and the movement of large or bulk quantities of data. And this gives us the ability to use a REST API that's very common to the industry and now provide access to tape storage for high density, high capacity, highly scalable, low cost data storage. And that is Deep Simple Storage Service, or DS3. So there are a number of different ways to get a client that can be used with BlackPearl. And remember, without a client component, the BlackPearl appliance is only half of the solution, so you need to have both halves. In order to get the client piece, there are three ways to do that. SpectraLogic is building clients internally, the first of which we have in beta right now, which is a Hadoop client, and we're working on some additional application clients. As we get those clients built, they will be posted to our developer site. Those can be downloaded and used by anybody who wants to. The second way to get a client is we are also working with various software partners to have the client integrated in their software package. So if you, in the future, have certain software applications, whether it's in the media and entertainment space or the backup space, the archive space, if they've incorporated the DS3 client, you'll have that client available for use that way. The third way to get a client is to go ahead and build a client yourself. We have a number of customers with very specific use cases and workflows who are actually building their own client component right now. And in order to do that, the best way to access client capabilities is to visit our DS3 Development web portal. And it's a three-step process. First and foremost is you go ahead and register as a user. Once approved, then you can start downloading the DS3 Developer API and Software Development Kit materials. You have access to a user forum, and you have access to a software simulator. After you've downloaded the material and begun building your client, you can also download the simulator from that same developer site and begin testing your client code against a software simulator to help expedite the number of turns it takes to get all the bugs worked out of your client and ensure that it's stable. After you've tested the client against the simulator, you can then test the client against the hardware, and we have a number of different opportunities for you to do that as well. We sometimes make evaluation hardware available to client developers. We also have a try and buy program in place to get the hardware to you. And we're also standing up a remote login site here at the company headquarters in Boulder that will allow users from anywhere in the world to go ahead and log into actual physical equipment across the high-speed connection here in Boulder, Colorado, and test the client against hardware that we have on site. That kind of testing would be functional testing as opposed to performance testing, simply due to the desire to have as many people have access to the platform as possible. So it would be scheduled, but you do have the opportunity to access the hardware that way to test your client against. So a number of different options for client development testing. From a hardware standpoint, we've already talked about the appliance a little bit. It's a 2U appliance. It talks to the DS3 client to the DS3 interface over a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection on the host side. Data is cached on SSD cache within the appliance before being moved across either a fiber channel or SAS connection to tape drives within a SpectraLogic library. In terms of integration, we did ensure that the BlackPearl writes tapes in LTFS format into the library, which means it's highly shareable, it's not proprietary. Those tapes can go into any other environment with an LTFS application and be read back. Furthermore, we've also ensured that BlackPearl is integratable with other features in SpectraLogic libraries, including media lifecycle management, data integrity verification, tape drive diagnostics. We've also incorporated a hashing algorithm to ensure some level of security on the data as it goes from the client all the way out to the tape drives, where it could be further encrypted using tape drive-based encryption. This next slide provides some examples of DS3 SDK or Software Developer Kit API examples. We took the original Amazon Web Services S3 API and added a handful of commands to it, such as create bucket, bulk put, which allows us to move large quantities of data at once, bulk get, which allows us to retrieve very large quantities of data at once, and export bucket, which will allow a bucket of data to actually be exported from the library for disaster recovery purposes. Those are effectively the only additional command sets that were added to the original S3 API that's in wide-scale use today. So the whole purpose of the BlackPearl appliance was to start changing the way folks had looked at storage, particularly tape storage in the past. Moving from SCSI fiber channel block and files, lots of proprietary data formats and applications with limited scalability, practically no metadata, and effectively designed for specialists for very finite uses. What we're doing with DS3 is to simplify it, move to an easy-to-use object bucket style format using a flat namespace so the data can be put anywhere and easily retrieved using metadata. We're writing it in open shareable formats like LTFS, and because it's tape storage, it's almost endlessly scalable. We're still appending rich metadata to it, again, so it's easily findable in that flat object namespace. And we're now making tape storage accessible to anybody who wants it for any reason they would like to have it. So in summation, BlackPearl is the easiest way to move and store bulk data. It's currently in beta right now. We expect to start shipping revenue units by the end of this quarter. What you see again at the bottom is just the general data flow from the application through the client to the DS3 appliance, and then on out via fiber channel or SAS to the tapes in the Spectra Logic library. This next slide just provides a few basic examples of some data points with regard to the cost per gigabyte of the BlackPearl solution given different drive technologies, different libraries. The pricing you see below for the capacity shown, 6.4 petabytes, 2.4 petabytes, 1.9 petabyte, are all list prices, or based on list prices is the best way to put it, for those capacities and configurations. So with that covers the BlackPearl and Verde product sets as announced by SpectraLogic within the last year, and we will go ahead and take questions if anybody has any at this time.
Great. Thank you, John. And we do have a few questions that have come in. The first question is, do you think that 100 megabytes per second is enough for backup to disk?
Is 100 megabytes per second enough for backup to disk? That's a really good question, and I suppose that depends upon the backup window that you need to hit. For some customers, that may be sufficient. For others, typically not. As usual, mileage may vary depending on the use case.
Great. And the next question is a request to please talk about the performance of nTier again.
The performance of nTier. I guess the question is, to be honest with you, I'm not quite certain how to answer the question, if that's a throughput question in terms of data to or from the box, or if that's an IOP question. So if you could go ahead and send us an email or a message providing additional clarification on that question, we'll be happy to answer it.
And it looks like the response is throughput. He's looking for throughput.
Throughput.
Yes.
Again, that is also going to vary depending on the size and number of boxes in the configuration. It also depends upon the block sizes that are in use. So it's without lots of additional clarification, it's kind of hard to give a very specific answer.
Okay, and we have a couple other questions coming in. The next question is around nTier Verde, and the question is, what kind of file system does it use for the volumes?
That's a really good question. So the Verde platform uses the ZFS file system.
And then the next question is, what is the max throughput on nTier?
The max throughput on nTier, again, that's going to be difficult to assess without more information. If you can send us, your detailed requirements with regard to throughput, or in terms of block sizes, the percentage of read-write that's going on with the box and so forth, that would certainly help us.
That's great, and we can take that offline. We're happy to communicate that directly with some additional information. Okay, and then it looks like the next question is around migration. So as tape technologies reach end of life and others are developed, how is data migrated from old technology to new?
That's a good question. Currently, data migration is a fairly manual process. It's got to be read off of an old tape technology and written back onto a new tape technology. And oftentimes that involves people actually setting the jobs and managing the jobs to run. With BlackPearl, for instance, one of the things that we've designed the box to do is to go ahead and automatically migrate data. Let's assume that you're migrating from LTO 6 today and you want to migrate to LTO 8 in 5 years or whatever the release rate's going to be. You could go into BlackPearl and say read back all the buckets that happen to be on LTO 7 and write those to an LTO 8 bucket. At which point in time, BlackPearl would go ahead and start recalling the data from the LTO 6 or 7 drives, whatever it may be, and rewriting those to an LTO 8 drive with no other user intervention.
Okay, and it looks like we do have time for another question, and the last question is, how do you make multiple copies of data?
So with BlackPearl, at least currently today, we would go ahead and write data to 2 different buckets. So you might have your production bucket, for instance, and you might have a disaster recovery bucket, in which case you would write the data to both buckets. Those would not be simultaneous writes at this date. Those would be asynchronous writes. We will do a simultaneous write somewhere later on down the road on our roadmap. But at that point in time, as well as today, you would write to 2 different buckets, and one bucket could be ejected for disaster recovery purposes, while the other bucket would remain in the library, for instance.
Okay, well, thank you, John, for being with us this morning, and thank you, everyone on the phones, for joining us. We hope that you found this content useful, and we encourage you to reach out to your Spectra sales rep with any follow-up questions you might have. We wish you a great day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.